This chapter ends here.
So I'm Mike Thompson, and I'm going to tell you how finding my wife screwing her boss turned into the best thing that ever happened to me. Yeah, you read that right. I'd been in Phoenix for a week doing sales presentations that made paint drying look exciting. The conference ended early Thursday, so I figured I'd surprise Jessica with flowers and an early homecoming. Sweet, right? Wrong. The Uber driver wouldn't shut up about his nephew's baseball stats while I sat there with roses, thinking I was husband of the year. Our Phoenix suburban house looked normal from outside, but something felt off the second I walked in. Call it gut instinct or whatever, but the air felt charged like before a monsoon. Then I saw the jacket. Expensive tailored crap draped over our couch like it owned the place. Inside pocket had initials. RK. My stomach dropped, but I kept moving upstairs with my suitcase and those suddenly stupid roses. I heard voices before I reached our bedroom door. Low, intimate sounds that made my blood freeze. Opened the door, and there they were. Jessica and Robert Kane, her CEO at Kane Industries. Same Robert Kane I'd made small talk with at company parties while he was probably laughing at me behind my back. Robert looked over when I walked in and had the balls to smirk. Not embarrassed, not sorry. Like he'd already won some game I didn't know we were playing. Most guys would have lost their crap, started swinging or screaming. But sometimes when life hits you with something so monumentally screwed up, your brain goes into this weird calm mode. So I pulled out my phone, hit record, and said very calmly, "I just sent this video to your wife." Robert's face went white instantly. His phone started buzzing, and in his panic he hit speaker by accident. Elizabeth Kane's voice filled our bedroom, cold and sharp as a blade. "What am I looking at, Robert?" 6 words that sliced through the room like a chainsaw. Robert started stammering some BSS explanation, but Elizabeth cut him off with surgical precision. "Don't come home." Then dead silence. I told Robert to get out of my house. Not yelling, just stating fact. He scrambled for his clothes while Jessica whispered my name like it was some magic word that would undo the last 10 minutes. I didn't answer because, honestly, what the hell was I supposed to say? 3 a.m., sitting in my kitchen staring at the wall clock. Tick, tick, tick. Each second stretching out while my brain rewound the highlight reel of my stupidity. Those strategy dinners that ran until midnight. Yeah, real strategic. The way Jessica suddenly became Fort Knox with her phone, flipping it face down whenever I walked in. The jewelry she claimed was from the team for hitting quarterly targets. Turns out the only thing she was hitting was Robert Kane. But sitting there wasn't going to solve anything. So I did what any rational person would do when their life implodes. I went to confront the other sufferer. Elizabeth Kane lived in North Scottsdale, one of those pristine houses where the landscaping costs more than most people's cars. When she opened the door, she looked exactly like what you'd expect from someone who could buy and sell half of Phoenix. Blazer that probably cost more than my car, hair that defied physics, and eyes that could cut glass. But she didn't look surprised to see me. "Mr. Thompson," she said, stepping aside like she'd been expecting this visit. Her house was everything mine wasn't. Clean lines, expensive everything, silence that comes from having enough money to soundproof your life. She led me to her kitchen, all marble and stainless steel, and made coffee that tasted like it cost $50 a cup. We sat across from each other, trading information like forensic investigators. She showed me Robert's calendar, all those client meetings and strategy sessions that lined up perfectly with Jessica's mysterious late nights. I showed her credit card statements with charges at hotels I'd never heard of, expensive restaurants where apparently my wife was whining and dining herself with my money while screwing her boss. The timeline was depressingly clear. This had been going on at least 8 months. 8 months of me bringing home flowers while my wife was getting fertilized elsewhere. But Elizabeth wasn't crying or screaming. She was calculating, methodical, like planning a hostile takeover instead of a divorce. "I don't believe in screaming matches," she said, refilling our cups with surgical precision. "They're messy, undignified, and don't accomplish anything except making you look unstable in court." We made a pact right there in her pristine kitchen. No public scenes, no social media drama, just cold, calculated consequences delivered with Swiss watch precision. She handed me a business card for Sandra Martinez, a divorce attorney who doesn't believe in friendly fire. "She's expensive," Elizabeth warned, "but worth every penny. And Mike, don't let them think they can manage this. They made their choice. Now we make ours." Sandra Martinez turned out to be exactly what Elizabeth promised, a legal hunter in a power suit. Her office was all sharp angles and intimidating law books, the kind of place where justice gets served with financial ruin for whoever's stupid enough to cross her. Her questions were direct and designed to strip away emotional BS. Kids? No. Shared assets? Yes. Prenup? When I said no, I swear her eyes lit up like Christmas morning. This is good, she said, reviewing my evidence. Arizona's a no-fault state mostly, but infidelity affects property division and spousal support. You've got documentation that would make a forensic accountant weep with joy. Within hours, her team was filing motions that would turn their lives upside down. The retainer made my credit card cry, but you get what you pay for. And what I was paying for was the legal equivalent of a nuclear weapon. Meanwhile, at Kane Industries, the dominoes started falling. Corporate America tolerates a lot from executives: cocaine habits, embezzlement. But screwing employees while exposing the company to maltreatment lawsuits, that's when corporate lawyers sharpen their knives. The board chair started asking questions like, how exactly do you define client entertainment? And can you explain why this employee received bonuses significantly higher than her productivity metrics justify? Robert tried to ride it out like another business crisis that could be managed with PR spin. He moved into some ridiculous luxury rental that probably cost more per month than most people's annual salary. But Elizabeth's legal team had built such a comprehensive case that the board didn't just censure Robert, they launched him into orbit. Strategic sabbatical was corporate speak for, your wife's boyfriend just got fired for being a sexual maltreatment lawsuit waiting to happen. The beautiful thing about rich people is they always leave paper trails. Elizabeth's forensic accountant pulled apart Robert's expenses like performing surgery on a budget. Hotel suites, supposedly for client entertainment, that coincidentally happened when Jessica was working late. Business gifts that turned out to be diamond earrings. Weekend retreats billed as team building that seemed to involve exactly two executives building something that wasn't corporate synergy. But here's where the great love affair narrative fell apart faster than a house of cards. Turns out sneaking around is more romantic than dealing with each other in harsh daylight. Jessica, couch surfing with coworkers, finally landed in a studio apartment above a bar that never heard of quiet hours. Nothing eliminates romance like splitting grocery costs and arguing whose turn it is to take out trash, especially when you're both suddenly dealing with lawyers who charge more per hour than most make in a week. The cracks showed quickly: jealous texts about who Robert was talking to at work functions, arguments about money that escalated from whispers to full-blown shouting matches. The whole thing came to a head in a Whole Foods parking garage with a screaming match that ended with Robert throwing Jessica's phone against a concrete pillar. Witnesses reported language not typically heard in the organic produce section, along with accusations about financial responsibility that suggested their great love was more like mutual self-destruction. You know what they say about burning bridges? Sometimes you load them on a truck and haul them to the dump to watch industrial equipment turn them into compressed metal cubes. That's what I did with our bedroom. There's something deeply therapeutic about watching a garbage compactor swallow the bed where your wife screwed her boss. Getting a king-size mattress downstairs by yourself is like wrestling a fabric octopus, but I was running on pure spite. The bed frame came apart easier than my marriage had, which seemed fitting. At the dump, watching that compactor grab my marital bed and turn it into abstract art made of springs and regret, I felt lighter than I had in months. Step 2 involved renovation. I hired Maria's crew to sand and refinish the floors, stripping away years of scuff marks and whatever invisible traces of betrayal might have soaked into the wood. The smell of sawdust and polyurethane was sharp and clean, nothing like the lingering cologne and lies that had been hanging in the air. I picked paint colors Jessica had always vetoed. She wanted timeless neutrals that won't date the house. What she meant was safe and boring. I picked deep forest green that looked like thunderclouds. Each stroke covered not just bland beige, but 6 years of compromise, and pretending neutral was the same as happy. The new bed was simple. Heavy wooden frame that didn't squeak, no fancy headboard with romantic bees, warranty that didn't depend on anyone keeping promises. I bought sheets that were soft and white and completely mine, pillows that never supported anyone else's dreams or lies. First night in that renovated room was like staying in a hotel that happened to be in my house. Everything familiar but different. Walls the color of deep water, floors gleaming with fresh finish, air smelling like new beginnings instead of old regrets. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without reaching for someone who wasn't there. But the bedroom was just the beginning. I started making changes that felt revolutionary. left shoes by the door without lectures about tracking dirt, ate cereal for dinner watching SportsCenter because apparently that's what happens when you don't negotiate every meal like a peace treaty. Remote control lived permanently on my side of the couch. I could watch entire games without someone asking about rules or sighing about how boring football was. My manager noticed the difference. "You seem more focused lately, more engaged." He was right. Without constantly worrying whether Jessica was happy, whether I was doing enough, whether those late nights were really about work, I could actually focus. Problems that used to seem overwhelming suddenly looked manageable. It was like trying to solve math with half my brain tied behind my back. Then someone cut the ropes. Work stopped being this thing I did to pay bills and started being something I chose to engage with because I was actually good at it. I volunteered for messy projects everyone else avoided. Found problems that had been hiding in plain sight, like the Henderson account that was hemorrhaging money because their supplier had been gradually increasing prices while decreasing quality. Nobody noticed until I spent 3 weeks diving into their books like hunting buried treasure. The CEO sent me bourbon that probably cost more than my car payment. My manager started looking at me like I'd performed workplace miracles instead of just doing basic math with a functioning brain. But here's the thing about having extra mental bandwidth. You start noticing there's a whole world beyond your cubicle and imploding marriage. I remembered the community center volunteer orientation I'd signed up for months ago when Jessica was going through her "we should give back" phase. She'd lost interest after 2 weeks, which should have been another red flag. Miss Carmen Reyes ran the tutoring program like coordinating a military operation, but with more hugs and patience for kids who thought math was invented by Satan to ruin their lives. That's how I met Sophia, 9 years old, who'd apparently decided fractions were her personal enemy in a war she'd win through stubbornness and creative eraser applications. "Are you married?" she asked during our second session while working through pizza slice division problems. "I was," I said. "Did she unmarry you?" Sophia asked, which was probably the most accurate description of divorce I'd ever heard. "Yeah, she did." Sophia chewed her pencil eraser, processing this complex emotional data. "That sucks. Are you sad?" "Sometimes, but I'm getting better." "Good. Will you still come on Tuesdays?" "I'll still come on Tuesdays," I promised. There was something refreshing about Sophia's problem-solving approach. Identify the issue, ask direct questions, figure out next steps, move forward. No drama, no hidden agendas. Saturdays became about hiking. I joined a trail group at South Mountain, partly for exercise that didn't involve running from problems, partly curious whether I could handle people who didn't know about my recent catastrophe. Carmen was a software engineer who talked about coding like poetry. Diego worked city planning and knew history behind every bridge we passed. Lisa was a graphic designer with strong opinions about fonts who could spot bad kerning from 50 yards. They knew I was recently divorced because it came up naturally, but they didn't know about Robert or Jessica or the whole sordid mess. To them, I was just Mike who liked good coffee and quiet trails and could keep steady pace for 10 miles without complaining about heat. After hikes, we'd hit this breakfast taco place serving coffee strong enough to wake the dead. We'd sit at picnic tables under mesquite trees talking about nothing important and everything meaningful: work frustrations, weekend plans, random observations about Phoenix traffic, whether the food truck scene was getting too commercialized. It was normal in a way I'd forgotten existed. No hidden agendas, no careful navigation around sensitive topics. No wondering if someone was telling truth or just what they thought I wanted to hear. Just people being people, sharing breakfast tacos and trail mix and easy conversation when nobody's trying to impress anyone or cover up anything shameful. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I was learning what it felt like to be around people who actually seemed to enjoy my company. Not because they needed something or felt obligated, but because they genuinely liked having me around. It was a revelation wrapped in hiking boots and served with salsa verde. My parents had this amazing superpower I didn't fully appreciate until I was sitting in their kitchen eating mom's pozole, realizing they weren't asking a single damn question about my marital implosion. Not one. No probing about how I was holding up. No gentle suggestions about counseling or giving Jessica another chance. Just regular Sunday conversation about Dad's war with the neighbor's tree, Mom's book club debate about whether the latest bestseller was genius or garbage, whether the Suns had any shot at playoffs. They asked about work, whether I was eating enough vegetables, whether I'd gotten that car noise checked out. Normal parent stuff that had nothing to do with my personal crater. and everything to do with still being their kid. When I left, Mom sent me home with enough pozole to feed an army and a snake plant she was convinced even I couldn't eliminate. Practically impossible to eliminate. Even you should manage it. But the real game changer came from Elizabeth, who'd become my unofficial divorce war correspondent. Her text updates were sparse and precise, like battlefield reports from a commander without time for unnecessary details. Board escalated, policy enforced, settlement posture strong. Each message was intelligence from front lines of a conflict I was involved in but didn't have to actively fight. The latest had been particularly satisfying. Robert's strategic sabbatical confirmed, effective immediately. Corporate speak for your wife's boyfriend just got fired for being a sexual maltreatment lawsuit waiting to happen. I started seeing Dr. Rebecca Chen, a therapist who talked about boundaries like architectural features instead of psychological concepts. I'd expected therapy to be about exploring feelings and unpacking childhood trauma. Instead, Dr. Chen treated boundaries like practical tools, the way a contractor might discuss load-bearing walls. Think of boundaries as doors with locks you control, she said. You decide who gets keys, who gets invited in, who doesn't even get to knock. She had me practice saying revolutionary sentences. No, that doesn't work for me. I'm leaving now. Basic phrases I'd never learned to use without extensive justification and apology. Her homework was deceptively simple. Make personal rules and stick to them for 1 week. Not goals or aspirations, but actual rules with real consequences. Rule 1. I don't explain my no. If someone asks me to do something I don't want to do, no is a complete sentence. No detailed breakdown, no cost-benefit analysis, no dissertation on why their request doesn't align with my priorities. Rule 2. I don't chase people who hurt me. If someone decides they want out of my life through actions or choices, I won't spend energy convincing them otherwise. People show you who they are through behavior. Believe them the first time. Rule 3. I don't rescue what chooses to drown. This was specifically about Jessica, but applied to anyone creating their own problems, then expecting others to fix them. First test came when Jessica called crying about her landlord being unreasonable about damage deposits. Could I please talk to him because I was so much better at handling confrontations? Old Mike would have driven over with toolbox and checkbook. New Mike said, that doesn't work for me, and hung up. She called back 3 times. I didn't answer. Fourth voicemail included creative language about how I'd become cold and selfish since the divorce, as if basic self-preservation was a character flaw. I deleted all messages without listening completely. It felt weird, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit, but also powerful in a completely unfamiliar way. For the first time in years, I was choosing what problems deserved my attention. Other people's self-created emergencies didn't make the cut. Same rules applied at work, saying, I'm not available for evening calls unless it's genuine emergency, didn't result in termination or exile. People just adjusted expectations and started planning crises during business hours like functional adults. The snake plant became a weird symbol of this boundary thing. I put it in my home office next to diplomas and childhood baseball cards. Things that were mine, representing my interests and achievements, parts of life that had nothing to do with anyone else's approval. Every morning seeing that plant still alive felt like small victory over my historical inability to care for things depending on me. 3 years later, running into Jessica's friend at the grocery store felt like a minor inconvenience instead of major emotional event. Melissa had been one of Jessica's closest friends back when I thought I knew who Jessica was. She looked exactly the same. Carefully maintained hair, designer workout clothes, that Austin blend of wellness culture and subtle competitiveness. Mike, you look amazing, really amazing. Have you been working out? You seem so centered. Truth was, I did feel good. Not in desperate, overcompensating way divorced guys sometimes throw themselves into CrossFit, but in quiet, sustainable way that comes from actually liking the life you've built instead of just enduring it. I'm doing well, I said, which was completely true and sufficient. No need to elaborate on the journey, therapy, boundaries, or slow process of learning to be happy without needing someone else's permission first. But Melissa wasn't done mining for information. Do you ever hear from Jessica? She asked, voice lowered like we were discussing state secrets. No, I said, realizing as the word came out that it was both completely accurate and completely peaceful. I didn't hear from Jessica, didn't think about her, didn't wonder what she was doing or whether she was happy or sorry. She'd become irrelevant to my daily existence. Like high school classmates you realize you'll never see again and don't particularly want to. Melissa seemed to take my indifference as invitation to provide updates anyway. She's doing okay, I think. Moved to Tucson for a while, then came back, took this marketing job at some startup downtown. You know how it is with startups. Lots of equity promises, not much actual money. As for Robert, she continued, I heard he took some strategic sabbatical after that board review thing. Elizabeth's foundation doubled their STEM scholarships, though, so I guess something good came out of that mess. This was first I'd heard about Elizabeth's foundation expansion, and it made me smile. Elizabeth had taken energy she could have spent on revenge and channeled it into something helping kids get better education. Exactly the kind of move I'd expect from someone who treated life like chess and was always thinking 3 moves ahead. Conversation wrapped up with usual pleasantries and promises to stay in touch that we both knew were polite fiction. I finished grocery shopping with strange realization that running into Jessica's friend felt about as emotionally significant as running into my mailman. Pleasant enough, briefly informative, but ultimately just another minor interaction. Driving home, I thought about how 3 years ago that conversation would have ruined my entire week. I would have spent hours analyzing every word, wondering what Jessica had said about me, whether she was happy or struggling, whether she ever thought about what we'd had and lost. Now it was just information that didn't particularly affect me either way, like hearing about weather in a city I'd never visit. My house looked exactly like what it was, a place where someone lived who knew what he liked and wasn't ashamed of it. The forest green bedroom that had felt revolutionary 3 years ago now just felt like home. The expensive espresso machine had earned its place by making thousands of perfect cups. The massive sectional had supported countless naps and Sunday afternoons reading books nobody else had to approve of. But the real transformation was in smaller details only I'd notice. The way I could leave dishes overnight without guilt. The way I could spend entire Saturday doing nothing productive without someone making comments about wasted time. The way I could buy groceries based on what I actually wanted to eat instead of what would photograph well for social media. That evening, I sat on my back patio with perfect espresso, watching sky turn that particular shade of pink that only happens in Arizona during the 20 minutes between day and night. Somewhere in distance, I could hear kids playing. Sound of laughter, meaning summer was officially here. My phone buzzed with text from Miss Reyes asking if I could cover Thursday tutoring because another volunteer had family emergency. I texted back, of course, without checking my calendar first. Thursday meant helping Marcus with summer reading and listening to Sophia explain whatever scientific phenomenon she'd discovered on YouTube that week. The house was quiet but full, empty of other people, but completely occupied by a life that fit me like clothes I'd had tailored instead of bought off the rack. Every room reflected choices I'd made for reasons that made sense to me, from diplomas on office walls to baseball cards that had finally found their way out of storage, to the snake plant that had not only survived, but thrived, growing new shoots like a green middle finger to everyone who'd suggested I couldn't take care of anything depending on me. 3 years had taught me the best revenge isn't their suffering. It's this life that fits like perfectly broken-in boots, comfortable and sturdy and ready for whatever terrain comes next. It's discovering happiness doesn't require anyone else's participation or approval. That contentment can come from simple things like good coffee and quiet evenings, and satisfaction of showing up for people who need you to show up. Jessica and Robert had blown up 4 lives because they thought they deserved something more exciting than what they had. Something that felt more like movies and less like real life with its mundane pleasures and ordinary commitments. They'd chase drama and passion and thrill of secrets and stolen moments, and from what I could tell, they'd ended up with exactly what that kind of thinking usually gets you. Chaos, complications, and happiness that requires constant maintenance and validation from other people. Meanwhile, I'd learned to find joy in things that didn't require anyone else's cooperation. Perfect espresso, satisfaction of problems solved at work, feeling of strong legs carrying me up difficult trails. Simple pleasure of being exactly where I wanted to be instead of pretending to be somewhere else. I'd built a life that belonged entirely to me, that couldn't be taken away by someone else's bad decisions or midlife crisis or sudden discovery they'd rather be with someone else. The kids I tutored would grow up and probably forget my name, but maybe they'd remember that adults sometimes keep promises. The hiking group might drift apart, but we'd have these perfect Saturday mornings sharing breakfast tacos and walking through beautiful places with people whose company we enjoyed. My parents would continue sending me home with too much food and plants I might or might not eliminate, treating me like their son instead of sufferer of circumstances. Work would continue rewarding me for showing up as myself instead of carefully constructed version designed to avoid conflict and manage other people's emotions. And I would continue waking up each morning in a house that felt like home, in a life that felt like mine, surrounded by choices that made sense and relationships that didn't require constant negotiation or management or apology. The best part wasn't that I'd won or they'd lost. It was that I'd stopped keeping score entirely, stopped measuring my happiness against anyone else's success or failure, stopped caring whether the people who'd hurt me were thriving or struggling somewhere else in a life that had nothing to do with me anymore. 3 years. That's what recovery looked like. Not absence of darkness, but presence of illumination that came from finally understanding what you actually needed instead of what you thought you were supposed to want. And honestly, that felt like the sweetest revenge of all.